Okay, clearly immigration remains a hot button issue 10 weeks away from the election. Joining us are LA Unified School Board member Monica Garcia, a Hillary Clinton supporter, and Jorge Herrera of the group of Latinos for Trump. Thank you guys both so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, so the talk today by the campaign managers for both parties, Democratic and Republican candidates, talked about immigration. It has been Trump's hot button issue and main platform basically since he started this whole campaign. And now we're starting to see evidence of him possibly softening on his hardline stance of deporting 11 million illegal immigrants, no matter how long they've been in this country, creating sort of a deportation task force to get them out of here, whether they have maybe criminal history or not. Why do you think we're seeing a softening maybe of his stance on one of his signature issues? Is it a vote issue?
We're getting closer to the election, and I think the important piece is that we are all hearing Latino vote matters, and if Mr. Trump could be a learner and understand this is a very complex issue. This is not about just good and bad and right and wrong. This is about people. And the Latino community has a lot of interest, not just immigration, but certainly when you talk about families in such a dismissive way, when you characterize a bunch of people with one broad brush, I think there's a pushback. And what we're seeing is one of the candidates work to clean up the rhetoric. So,
well, Jorge, how do you respond to that?
Well, I think it's very interesting because right now, nobody really knows this, but the Obama administration is actively deporting people from Central America that they're seeking asylum from violence in Central America. So nobody's out there really talking about the things Obama has done. And let's remember, Bill Clinton during his time, he withheld over 12 million illegals from staying in this country, whether it was from deportations or turnbacks at the border. They did it, so they weren't characterized as they're characterizing Mr. Trump. And I think Mr. Trump understands the fact that Democrats and Hillary Clinton haven't really done anything for the middle class and minorities, as we see that the Hispanic wealth and African American wealth has declined over the last 8 years. The last point I'd like to make is I think he understands that we've increased our deficit up to $9 trillion, $10 trillion almost, and our economy is only growing at 1%, and Hispanics are a part of that. Right. So I think he understands that, and he's starting to, he wants to tap into the Hispanics so they can understand that Mr. Trump is the only one who's not controlled and who can make a difference for everybody, not just Hispanics.
And certainly he's not the first candidate to deal with the immigration issue in such a hard stance. Like you said, Clinton has participated in deportations as well. So has President Obama. We've seen many times the DREAM Act, people who have come out in support of getting a path to citizenship. But if it's not just about votes, maybe it's about numbers like this. I saw earlier this week in a new poll from the Pew Research Center that said most people in America, an overwhelming 76%, believe that illegal immigrants are as hardworking as U.S. citizens. 67% say they are no more likely than Americans to commit serious crimes. And 61% oppose building a wall along the border with Mexico, which is another signature platform of Donald Trump. These numbers like this that are at least coming out from the Pew Research Center show that Americans are not taking the same stance as many of Trump's base supporters.
So I agree. I agree that Americans are not with Mr. Trump and his analysis. We need to understand our history. We need to know that we are a nation of immigrants. We need to know that immigrants make countless contributions every single day, past and present. And we need to know that just calling out one sector of the society and saying you're going to build a wall is not a solution.
But it's not just one sector. He's also criticized Muslims and of course, we know his stance on letting Muslims and people of Islamic faith into the country as well. It's not just Latinos.
That's a great point. That's a great point. So let me talk about Los Angeles. We know that over 60% of the gangs here in Los Angeles are illegal immigrants, and I have no idea why we allow that. This is the things that Donald Trump has talked about. We need to get rid of the criminals first. Then we'll deal with the 11 million. His stance is still that they have to go, but they have to come back. And he said it. It's on record. We have to reform the system. We have to change it because we know, he said it out of his own words, they're good people. They're good, hardworking people. We need to figure out how to get them here legally. And I'd like to touch one more point on Saudi Arabia. In 2014, Saudi Arabia stopped importing and allowing Syrian refugees for risks of terrorism. It's in there. Look it up. mainstream media, CNN, doesn't really cover this. It's a fact. Saudi Arabia, top oil-producing countries, among others, have banned Muslims. So it's not xenophobic. It's just common sense leadership, and we have to do it. We have to protect our country. We have to protect our borders and our citizens. And like he says, we have to unite everybody as one. One country under one flag. There's no color. Just one country under one flag. That's it.
So that's interesting because you gave us some statistics. When we think about Los Angeles, when we think about LA Unified, where 74% of the children who come to our schools are of Latino heritage, where we have countless immigrants and countless languages spoken, I wonder if Mr. Trump is talking about an America that represents them and includes them, includes their history and their contribution. But part of the issue is when we hear words that talk about us and them, where we hear hatred that is about a group of people, whether or not anyone else on the planet is doing it, that is not what's before the American public. What is before the American public is, do we stand on our ideals that an America not yet includes all of us, and that in fact we are stronger together. And you know what's wonderful about even tonight? Latinos matter. The Latino agenda in Los Angeles, in California, in the United States of America is about access and opportunity, is about good jobs and good schools, and is about
so we have
bringing
common
me in
ground
together.
here, at least on this issue.
do.
So what's the major defining point between you two?
So the defining point is that Trump wants a unified America. He just wants everybody to come here legally. Like I said, Mexico deports lots of people. They deport more Central Americans than the United States does. They get to enforce their immigration laws. It's time for us to do that. There's no hatred behind that. It's just a typical talking point that the left uses to diminish our point. You want to talk about hatred? Let's talk about Hillary Clinton. I'm an average American. I am not alt-right. I am not racist. I am not fringe. I'm a nurse. I save lives. I love what I do. I love my country, and it's time to do things right. We have to reform immigration, and that's what he's saying. Let them come back in so we can have that one unified America legally under the law. There's no hatred behind that. The rhetoric may be a little tough, but what's tougher is let's look at the fact of illegal immigration. So we're losing about $113 billion a year here. That's $1 trillion over the next 10 years.
What are you talking about? In lost jobs?
No. In terms, so people,
maintaining
so
it.
people like to argue that illegal immigrants contribute, but when you look at the facts, over 70% of them are using stolen Social Security numbers. The problem is that the cost of allowing illegals to remain outweighs the net income. So we're losing money here. Bottom line, look at the statistics. Don't listen to the talking points. We just want to fix the system. We have to reform it. Donald Trump is the only one who can do it. It's not about the language. It's about the truth. We have to change the system, guys. It's just time to do it right. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing racist with that. There's nothing xenophobic about that. And there's no hate behind it. Because
The good news is,
okay,
you're
going to have to make your last point quickly.
Anaheim, Los Angeles, more people getting involved, more Latinos getting involved. That is good for America.
All right.
Vote Trump, guys.
Bottom line, Monica Garcia, thank you so much. Hillary Clinton supporter, Jorge Herrera of the group Latinos for Trump. Thank you both.
Thank you.
We are
for coming
stronger
in.
together.
Thank you.
Yes, and
We
I'm
are.
glad you guys did find
It's time
some
to have
common ground.
common sense solutions. Let's just unify everybody. We got to solve our problems, guys. We can do it. No more hate. No more divisive rhetoric from both sides. We can
If
do
only
this
Jorge
together.
was on the ballot, I think.
I know, right?
You know.
I think we might have another strong candidate here. Thank you guys both very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.